All right. Welcome in, everyone. Kicking off another deep dive here. And today we're going to be tackling a concept that's so simple, it's so profound.
Hmm.
It really has the potential to completely change how we view and respond to, well, honestly, any interaction we have with a
I
child.
think that's right. Yeah.
And this idea comes from some research that I've been really digging into lately, and it can be summed up in this really powerful statement.
Okay.
Your child isn't giving you a hard time, your child is having a hard time.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is such a simple way to really reframe our thinking about challenging behavior.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to be unpacking today.
Okay, sounds good.
We're going to explore what this statement really means,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
developmental science that supports this idea, and most importantly, we're going to dive into some very practical strategies that we can all start using right away.
Awesome.
The goal here is to help everyone move away from that feeling of frustration, which, let's be honest, we all experience
All
sometimes,
right,
right?
absolutely. Oh,
And towards a place of deeper empathy and connection with the kids in our lives.
I love it. I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, so let's just jump right into the heart of this concept.
Okay.
When a child is acting out, whether it's a full-blown tantrum in the middle of the grocery store,
Right.
refusing to get dressed,
Ew.
or just that constant whining that can really wear you down,
Okay.
our first instinct, and I know I've definitely been here, is often to think,
Mm-hmm.
why are they doing this to me?
Right.
Like, why are they choosing to be so difficult?
Absolutely. Yep.
But this new perspective, this idea that we're talking about, it's all about asking a completely different question.
Okay.
Instead of, why are they doing this to me?
Right.
We should be asking, what is making this hard for them right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's such a huge shift
It is.
because it really moves us away from seeing the child as being deliberately defiant or manipulative.
Oh, for sure.
And instead, it helps us to see their behavior as a signal that they're struggling with something.
Mm-hmm.
And that something could be a whole range of things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It could be an emotion that just feels too big for them to handle.
Right.
It could be that they're having trouble communicating what they need,
Mm.
or maybe they're just feeling overwhelmed by the situation.
Yeah, it could be so many things.
And, this is especially true for younger children.
Right.
They just haven't developed the words or the emotional maturity to express their distress in a way that we adults can easily understand.
Absolutely. It's like they don't have the toolbox yet
Right,
to
exactly.
manage all those big feelings.
And so their struggles, their needs, they come out in these behaviors
Mm.
that we might perceive as challenging or difficult.
Yeah, we see it as misbehavior, but
Exactly.
it's really just communication.
It is. It's their way of communicating.
Yeah.
And, I think it's really easy for us as adults to fall into the trap of thinking that kids are just trying to test boundaries or get attention.
Oh, all the time.
I know I've been there and I had to check myself.
Yeah.
But this whole idea that we're discussing today,
Mm.
it's all about taking a step back
Mm.
and really considering what might be going on beneath the surface.
Yes, looking deeper.
To kind of help make this idea a little more relatable, I want you to think about a time when you were having a really rough day.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe you had a stressful meeting at work and then you came home and everything just seemed to go wrong.
Oh, I can picture it.
The internet's not working, dinner burned,
Mm.
and suddenly you just find yourself snapping at your partner or your kids.
I've been there,
Yeah, we've all been there.
for sure.
Now imagine in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
instead of someone recognizing that you're having a tough time and offering some understanding or support,
Right.
they just criticize you for being grumpy or short-tempered.
Oof, that would not feel good.
It wouldn't, right? It would probably just make you feel even worse.
Absolutely. It'd probably make me more defensive.
Yeah, and even more likely to lash out.
Totally.
And in a way, that's often what we're doing to kids when we respond to their struggles with punishment or scolding instead of empathy.
Yes, we're just adding fuel to the fire.
Right, exactly.
And instead of helping them regulate, we're just dysregulating them further.
And so instead of asking why are they acting out,
Mm-hmm.
the much more helpful question is,
Okay.
what's going on for them that's leading to this behavior?
Yes. What need is not being met?
Right, and I think this naturally leads us to talk about the science behind this whole perspective,
Yeah, let's get into that.
and specifically the science of emotional regulation.
Okay.
Because this isn't just about being a more patient parent.
No, it's not.
There's actually a biological basis for why children have such a hard time with their emotions.
Absolutely. A lot of it comes down to brain development and specifically the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, the prefrontal cortex.
That's the part of our brains that's responsible for all the things we need to regulate our emotions.
So things like,
Impulse control,
yeah,
rational thinking, planning, decision making,
okay.
and it plays a huge role in managing our emotions.
And so is it that children's prefrontal cortexes aren't fully developed yet?
Exactly. It's one of the last parts of the brain to mature.
Right.
Actually, it doesn't fully develop until our mid-20s.
Wow, the mid-20s, that's a long time.
It is a long process, and it means that young children's brains just aren't equipped to handle big emotions in the same way that adults can.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah, they literally don't have the same capacity.
So it's like they have all these intense feelings, but they don't have the neural pathways yet
Right.
to process and regulate them effectively.
Exactly. And that's why we see those big emotional outbursts, the tantrums, the meltdowns.
It's not a choice.
No, not at all.
It's a biological reality.
It's their brain trying to cope with something overwhelming.
So when that little one is screaming because they wanted the blue cup and got the green cup,
Uh-huh.
they're not trying to be manipulative.
Yep.
Their brain is genuinely overwhelmed by that disappointment.
They're having a hard time not giving you one.
Right. And they just don't have the skills yet to
No.
manage that feeling in a calmer way.
Exactly.
And this whole understanding of brain development really emphasizes the importance of emotional coaching,
Yes, it's so important.
which is essentially guiding children in understanding and managing their emotions.
It is. And it's our job as the adults in their lives to help them build those skills.
Right, because they can't do it on their own yet.
No, they need us to teach them, to model it for them.
So knowing all of this, how can we as adults respond more effectively?
Yeah.
Right.
How do we put this into practice?
Right, because it's one thing to understand the why,
Mm-hmm.
but when you're in the middle of a meltdown, it's the how that really matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need strategies.
We do, and I think it's important to acknowledge that it's incredibly difficult to not react with our own frustration when a child is having a hard time.
Oh, it's so hard. It's natural to get triggered.
It is, but the first step, and often the most challenging one, is to pause and try to regulate our own emotional response before we even react to the child.
Take a breath. Find your calm.
Yes, because a dysregulated adult cannot effectively help a dysregulated child.
We've all been there, haven't we?
Oh yeah, trying to reason with a screaming child when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed yourself.
It just doesn't work.
It doesn't. It just makes everything worse.
Yep. It escalates the situation.
So step one, take a breath, find your own calm.
Okay, got it.
What comes next?
Once you've taken that moment for yourself, the next key is to validate their feelings.
Okay, validate their feelings.
And this doesn't mean that you agree with their behavior.
Right. We can address the behavior later.
But it means acknowledging and accepting that they are feeling a certain way. So instead of dismissing their emotions, like saying, stop crying, it's not a big deal,
Right.
you can try reflecting back what you're seeing.
So you could say something like,
I see that you're really upset right now, or I can hear that you're feeling very angry.
where you're acknowledging the feeling.
Yes, and you can even try to name the emotion for them, like, it looks like you're feeling really frustrated because you can't have another turn.
And so just by doing that, you're letting them know that their feelings are seen and acknowledged.
Exactly.
Even if you don't necessarily agree with the reason for the intensity of the emotion.
Right, or the way they're expressing it.
But you're saying, I see you, I hear you.
And that can be so powerful in de-escalating the situation.
Because the child feels understood.
Yes, exactly.
And this actually leads us to the next important step,
Okay.
which is to connect with them emotionally
Yeah.
before you even try to correct the behavior.
Connect before you correct.
Yes, because when children feel understood,
Mm-hmm.
they're much more open to guidance and learning.
Absolutely. They're more receptive.
So before you jump in with rules or consequences,
All right.
try to show empathy.
Okay.
For example, if they're upset about having to leave a friend's house,
Mm-hmm.
you could say something like,
I know. It's hard to say goodbye when you're having so much fun playing.
right, you're acknowledging their perspective,
Yeah, you're getting on their level.
and you're helping them to feel connected.
Exactly.
And then once that connection is established,
Mm-hmm.
you can move towards guiding them instead of just punishing the behavior.
Okay, so how do we do that?
So instead of immediately resorting to consequences like timeouts or scolding,
Right, which can make them feel worse.
yeah, which can make them feel isolated and misunderstood,
Mm.
the focus shifts to teaching them strategies for managing their emotions.
Okay, so we're teaching them emotional regulation skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where that emotional coaching that we were talking about earlier really comes in.
Yeah, give me some examples.
You can try simple techniques together, like
Oh,
taking deep breaths.
okay. Deep breaths.
You can offer them choices to give them a sense of agency.
I like that. Choices.
So you could say something like, would you like to sit quietly with me for a moment? Or would you prefer to draw a picture about how you're feeling?
Mm-hmm. Giving them options.
And sometimes just offering a comforting hug can make a world of difference.
Especially if they're receptive to physical touch.
Right. It's all about meeting them where they're at.
So we're not trying to suppress their emotions, but rather teach them how to handle them.
Exactly. It's not about suppression.
It's about providing them with the tools they need.
It's about helping them to develop a sense of emotional literacy.
Yes, to understand and manage their inner world.
And the ultimate goal here is to create a safe space for your child to express their emotions.
A safe space.
They need to know that they can experience big feelings without fear of rejection or shame.
Right, without being punished for their feelings.
Exactly. And when you consistently respond with patience and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
you're not only helping them navigate that specific moment
But you're also teaching them valuable lifelong skills.
for handling their emotions in healthy ways.
Yes, it's an investment in their future.
And this all sounds great in theory,
Yeah.
but I think it's helpful to hear some real-world examples.
Absolutely. Let's make it concrete.
Do you have any stories or examples of how this has worked for other parents or caregivers?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'd love to hear one.
So let's think about Sarah and her 4-year-old daughter.
Okay.
Now, her daughter would often have these really intense tantrums when it was time to leave playdates.
Ugh, yeah, I can relate to that.
And Sarah used to feel so frustrated and judged by other parents.
Right, like you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. But after learning about this new perspective,
Mm,
she started reminding herself that her daughter wasn't trying to ruin her afternoon.
right.
She was probably just struggling with the transition and the disappointment of leaving something fun.
Yeah, it's a big change for a little kid.
It is. And so instead of her usual rushed and sometimes stern approach, Sarah started giving her daughter a 5-minute warning.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And then she would acknowledge how much fun her daughter was having, and then offer a comforting hug and a gentle transition activity for the way home, like singing songs together.
So it's like she was acknowledging the difficulty of the transition
Exactly.
and helping her daughter to navigate it.
And you know what? Over time, those intense tantrums became much less frequent.
Mary.
Yeah, because her daughter felt seen and understood in her disappointment.
Wow, it's amazing.
It is, and it actually made it easier for her to manage the transition.
And I think that's such a powerful example of how proactively acknowledging the potential difficulty of a situation
Right.
and offering empathy can actually prevent or at least lessen those big emotional outbursts.
Exactly. It's all about setting them up for success.
And do you have another example that maybe illustrates how to respond in the moment when a child is already struggling?
Yes. Let's think about Mark and his 6-year-old son.
Okay.
His son was learning to tie his shoes.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is, and he would get so frustrated.
Yeah.
He would yell, throw the laces, and say he couldn't do it.
I can picture it.
And Mark's initial reaction was often to either take over and do it for him,
Right.
or to tell him to just keep trying without much support.
Yeah. Which probably just made his son feel worse.
It did, but then Mark remembered this idea we've been talking about.
That his son was having a hard time.
Exactly, not giving him one.
And so he shifted his approach.
Okay, how so?
Instead of focusing on the task itself in that moment of frustration,
Mm-hmm.
he started acknowledging his son's feelings.
All right.
He would say things like,
I see you're feeling really frustrated with these laces. It can be tricky to learn something new.
right? He was validating his son's experience.
Yes, and then he would offer to take a short break together.
Okay.
Maybe do something fun for a few minutes, and then come back to it with a fresh perspective and his dad's patient support.
So he was basically helping his son to regulate his emotions before trying to tackle the task again.
And this really helped his son to feel understood in his struggle.
I bet it did.
It reduced the emotional intensity of the moment, and ultimately made him more willing to keep practicing.
And I think these examples really highlight that it's not about being permissive or avoiding setting boundaries.
No, not at all.
It's about meeting the child's emotional needs first.
Yes, connection before correction.
Exactly. And when you do that,
Mm-hmm.
it makes them much more receptive to learning and guidance.
Absolutely. It builds trust and cooperation.
So as we start wrapping up this deep dive,
Okay.
what are the absolute key takeaways you want our listeners to hold on to?
I think the most important thing to remember is that shift in perspective.
Ugh.
When a child is exhibiting challenging behavior,
Mm-hmm.
it's likely a sign that they are struggling with something.
Right.
Not that they're intentionally trying to make your life difficult.
They're having a hard time not giving you one.
Exactly. And also keep in mind that emotional regulation is a developmental process.
It's a skill that takes time to learn.
Yes, and children need our patient guidance and support to develop these abilities.
And our calm presence during those intense moments can be so helpful.
It can really help them co-regulate.
And finally, always prioritize connection before correction.
Yes, that's so important.
When a child feels seen, heard, and understood,
Mm-hmm.
they're much more likely to cooperate and learn
Absolutely. It creates a foundation of trust.
than when they feel judged or punished.
Exactly.
It's about building a relationship rooted in understanding and empathy.
Which creates a more secure and nurturing environment for children to thrive.
So, to close out today's deep dive, here's a final thought for everyone to really consider.
Okay.
If we all consistently approach those challenging moments with children as indicators of an internal struggle,
Mm-hmm.
how might this change not only our individual relationships with the kids in our lives,
Right.
but also our broader societal understanding of child development and discipline?
It's a big question.
It is.
But I think it's worth asking.
Yeah, what if empathy and understanding became our default response?
It would change everything.
It would foster greater emotional resilience and stronger connections from the very beginning.
It would create a more compassionate world.
And I think that's a really powerful thought to hold on to
I agree.
as we continue on this journey of interacting with children.
Absolutely.
So thank you all for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been great having you,
It's been a pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you then.